Next, we turn to the nature and specifically to a remarkable conversation story unfolding at one of Oman's most industry sites. The Raptor restaurant examines how BS Dhofar landfill has become an unexpected sanctuary for winter eagles and what that tells us about biodiversity in the context of industry operation. I joined a presentation by Jamal Al Jabri from the Environment Society of Oman and Fatma Al Sharji of Al Bia.
Okay. Thank you so much for the introduction. This is Fatma Sharji from BIA, and I have with me here Jamal Al Jabri from Environment Society of Oman, and today we'll be going through the Raptor restaurant projects in Thamreit landfill. This is one of the BIA landfills. So first of all, just to give you an overview, Oman basically is considered to be as a stronghold or as a regional stronghold for migratory and resident raptor species. Examples of these species are Egyptian vulture, lappet-faced vulture, and steppe eagles. The species that we are focusing on in today's presentation are steppe eagles. Those are considered to be scavengers. They're occasional hunters during the winter, but active hunters during the summer. Those species basically come to Oman, especially during the winter season, and they're highly concentrated in the Dhofar governorate. They used to be once they used to be one of the most common large eagles in the world, but recently they have been classified as endangered based on the International Union for Conservation of Nature Red List. They're basically facing several threats. One of these key threats are habitat loss, electrocution from the power lines, poisoning from contaminated carcasses, usually linked with the veterinary drugs that's basically used in livestock. And most importantly is food scarcity due to the reduced availability of the natural food resources. And this is basically one of the main threats that we are addressing in today's talk. These raptors are considered to be very important for the environment. They're basically nature's waste managers. Their digestive system allows them to safely consume carcasses, which helps reduce diseases and environmental health risk. And they're also essential for a healthy ecosystem. They play a key part of the global and local biodiversity and natural waste cycle. As you can see here, two pictures of steppe eagles basically feeding safely from the slaughterhouse waste sustainably at one of our Thamreit landfill. If we talk in a global context, this map you can see the global migration of steppe eagles based on the track data. So just to briefly walk you through it, the red line here represents the broader migration pattern of steppe eagle species from Western Asia to Eastern African flyway, while the blue line here basically represents the migration of steppe eagles in the autumn season from Central Asia all the way to the south, passing through the Arabian Peninsula including Oman. There have been certain individuals which have been recorded going to the northern part of Oman, but the majority of them actually are spending their winter in the Dhofar governorate. The map itself shows that Oman is not an isolated case, but instead it's part of the broader migration pattern, which makes it relevant for international conservation in this area. As we take a closer look at the map of Oman itself, there are large numbers that have been recorded at landfill sites at different locations, but the highest have been recorded in Raisut dump site back in 2019 with 1,122 individuals. As soon as we have closed the dump site back in 2019 and we have shifted to an engineered landfill in Thamreit landfill, the steppe eagles adapted their migration pattern to basically reroute and go to Thamreit. The map here shows that the presence of the steppe eagles across different waste sites, as those sites plays a very important role for feeding those birds. So historically, the practice of waste management was about open dump sites. This actually caused environmental pollution and health risks. But for the Raptors, that was a very big advantage because they had a free access area of the natural food resources. However, as soon as we transitioned to engineered landfill, which was a very positive step in terms of the improving environmental control and reducing the pollution, this was an advantage for the Raptors because it had limited their access to the natural food resources at the waste disposal sites. Despite the change and the transition, if you go to Thamrit landfill, you will still basically, we continue to see the steppe eagles at the landfill. They still use them, flying around, perching, searching for food. Sometimes they would go to the landfill active dumping area, trying to find the food there. Their presence at the landfill provides an opportunity for monitoring and biodiversity research. And that's when the idea of having a Raptor restaurant area in the landfill came up. So we have decided to do a pilot study in Thamrit landfill. And of course, the main objective here is to address one of the key threats, which I've highlighted in my first slide, addressing the food scarcity for migratory raptors, as well as utilizing the slaughterhouse waste in a safely manner that we receive it at our landfill and supply them as a feed source. And part of the objective here is to assess the effectiveness of having a managed feeding area within the landfill by tracking the numbers of the birds that are utilizing the feeding station and the birds that are actually using the landfill in general at specific vantage points, as well as to evaluate or assess the behavior of the steppe eagles and their feeding patterns. The pilot took place in October 2025 up to March of this year, and this is basically in alignment with the peak season of the birds wintering in Oman. The concept of the Raptor restaurant is very simple. The function, as I mentioned earlier, is to have a controlled, safe feeding sites that would actually redirect those raptors from the active landfill dumping area to their designated area. So this is how the Raptor restaurant looks like in the landfill. It's fenced and gated area, open from the top for safe raptor access, so that they can access it, they can see that there is a food for them there, and it's easier for them to land and take off. Now, how this pilot study linked to the BS sustainability objective. It basically promotes waste diversion and circularity through the transformation of the slaughterhouse waste into an environmental solution, which has also contributed to the reduction of the carbon footprint that would be from the decomposition of the slaughterhouse waste in the landfill. Additionally, this project actually aligns very well with our ESG priorities, specifically the environmental pillar, as biodiversity is one of our key material topic. And the project itself, or the pilot itself, clearly shows that there is an integration between waste management and biodiversity conservation. Furthermore, the pilot also clearly shows that landfill is not a place only for waste disposal, but it could be also a place where environmental solution can be implemented. In this pilot, we couldn't just work alone, but instead we have established a very strong and collaborative partnership model. As BIA, we act as a project owner and strategic lead. We also have our scientific lead from Environment Society of Oman that are focused into the scientific research design of the study and monitoring. In terms of site operation and maintenance, we have partnered with Omani SME based in Dhofar that are responsible for the site operation and monitoring as well. We have also partnered with the International Avian Research in terms of the scientific and technical advisor. I think I've given enough introduction about the project. Now I'll hand it over to our scientific lead, Environment Society of Oman, to walk you through the methodology of the study and the key results and insights.
Thank you, Fatima. So before moving into the project, I would like to introduce the Environment Society of Oman. The Environmental Society of Oman is the first and only environmental NGO working across research and conservation, capacity building, community engagement, fundraising, and charity events and education. More importantly, we act as a bridge between science and society, between government and communities, and between the private sector and conservation. And this work with this project with BIA is an example of that collaboration in action. Now that I have introduced the Environment Society of Oman, I will move into the methodology that was used for the Raptor restaurant pilot project. And so the methodology had four main parts. First of all, training, food provision, bird counts, and behavior monitoring. For the training, so the site operator or the observer was trained on the survey methods, also on the use also on raptor identification and age classification, and on the use of field equipments, including the use of binoculars and spotting scope. Now moving to the food provision, the food was supplied on a daily basis, and the site operator will monitor the quantity, the condition, and if there was any food left over at the site. Now moving to the bird counts, the counts was held twice a week from fixed vantage point, covering the landfill area and the feeding station. And at each point, the observer repeated the count twice and then took the higher number. To avoid double counting, the birds moving in and out of the area was considered as much as possible. Moreover, camera traps were also used to support the field observations and also to record activity and behavior at the feeding station. Here you can see the field setup and the materials that was used for the monitoring. Here, first you can see the training material that was used for raptor identification and also for age classification. Oops. And then we have the forms, we have field sheets and digital form for data collection. And then the last photo shows the vantage points that was used to perform the counting. Now moving into the results here, you can see in this graph the total bird counted inside and outside the feeding station, so inside the feeding station and in the landfill area. In the x-axis, you can see the survey date, and the y-axis, the total number of birds counted. And as you can see here, we have an overall increase in the number of birds early winter, and then peaked during January, and then started to decrease by the end of the winter season. And we recorded the highest number recorded was 569. This number highlights the importance of the site for the wintering steppe eagles. Here you can see we have another graph showing the feeding activity inside the feeding station, and we have the same. The x-axis showed the survey date, and then the y-axis is the number of birds counted. And overall, we have observed consistent use of the feeding station by the steppe eagles, and the higher number recorded was 56 during February. We also have examined the age composition of the visiting steppe eagles, and as you can see, the sub-adults represented the highest proportion of the steppe eagles visited, and then followed by juveniles, and then finally the adults. Here you can see how we identified the age class of the steppe eagles. As you can see, the juveniles here like have a clear white bands at the end of the flight feathers, whereas the adults, if you can see it here, have a darker body and the absence of this white bands at the end of the flight feathers. And whereas the sub-adults showed an intermediate characteristics between the two, with the white bands less prominent than the juvenile. Now moving to camera traps observations. So the camera traps gave valuable insights into how the feeding station was used, and we observed a range of behaviors, including feeding, flying, perching, and terrestrial movement, and also interaction between individuals. Moreover, besides the raptors that was observed, other species was observed inside the feeding station. These species include fox, wadi dogs, and stray cats. So the presence of this species was not observed, was observed outside of the steppe eagle's feeding time. No overlap was observed when the steppe eagles were actively using the feeding station. This confirms that the restaurant is safe for the raptors. So for the key insights, the feeding station and its surrounding the Landfill area supported a high number of steppe eagles during winter. Also, regular use of the steppe eagles was confirmed with 56 individuals feeding at one time. And also the site supports a diverse age structure dominated by sub-adults. Finally, the pilot study demonstrates effective use of managed feeding for conservation and waste reduction. Based on the finding of the Raptor restaurant pilot project, we identified several strategic recommendations for the project continuation. For the data validation and project justification, we recommend evaluate the impact of wildlife monitoring in waste management site to understand the impact of waste management site on the raptor migratory routes. Also, we recommend for integration of wildlife observation with waste management operations and to enhance the counting and observations of avian wildlife, and also to increase the counting outside of the feeding station and beyond the determined vantage point. And for the sustainable food supply, we recommend designing a sustainable supply chains for biological waste inside the feeding station in order so the feeding station can continue in a sustainable way. Moreover, we recommend expanding the monitoring to other waste sites in Oman where the steppe eagles are known to occur, including the locations that Fatima mentioned earlier. Now I will hand over to Fatima to conclude the presentation.
Thank you so much, Jamla. I think from the interesting, basically, results and key insights, the pilot study basically confirms that the potential of managing feeding site at the landfill is feasible. And it actually also clarifies that there's an opportunity to have an integrated waste management with biodiversity conservation. The results are initial, and I think it has also been highlighted by Jamla that further studies, further monitoring will be required to fully validate having the managed feeding station within the landfill. I think as we move forward, we continue to collaborate with research and conservation partners to further develop this work. I would say we come to the end of our presentation. Thank you so much for listening.